And welcome to my cellar one more time. Pardon me. Unless you hear otherwise, there will be no new one on the 27th because I will be in the Keys visiting my son and daughter-in-law. So, this one, next one, skip one, coming back. Oh, looks like I have a bug flying around in the lights. Interesting. Okay, shall we start? I think we have more great gaming years ahead of us. I appreciate your continued contributions to gaming. Well, yeah, I certainly don't think the end of the gaming era has come upon us. Ben Riggs, I believe, wrote a very long, well thought out piece about the end of tabletop RPGs, and I disagree with it in several points, and we'll be touching on a couple of those points later, so I'm not going to jump the gun here. This is from a good friend of mine. Every time I hear the word Frazetta, I always dream about the guys from Molly Hatchet sitting around drinking Dr. Pepper and playing D&D. Yeah, that's quite a fantasy image, isn't it? My friend's a heavy metaler. Loves it and plays it. In the first edition AD&D Dungeon Master Guide, there's an appendix which gives ideas on how to play AD&D solo without a GM or by exchanging dungeon and room layouts with a friend. Could you tell us how common the exercise of solo AD&D play was and how the appendix came to be included in the DMG? Thank you for offering us this wonderful... Okay, you're welcome. To my knowledge, what I remember from back then, about the time AD&D was being created, was that there was none going on that I'm aware of, but it seemed to be a source of frustration for some people. However, I don't ever recall getting a letter to Dragon, and I don't ever recall TSR getting a letter about this. But apparently, somebody got somebody's ear that was not in the corkboard array when I left the room that day. That was something that came up. Oh, okay, it's your book. It's your name on it, okay. I don't know why you would want to, unless you're just practicing rolling dice. Worse yet, just killing crap so you can level your player up and your character up, and no witnesses to share your glory or record your failures or anything. I don't understand it. There's only been a couple of really good solo games in my history, in my past knowledge. And the best one of those was a game called B-17, where you flew a bomber in a formation in bombing runs over Europe. And that's because it was just a ton of dice rolling. Gary thought it needed to go in there, so I guess Gary put it in. Or somebody talked to Gary and said, hey, do you got it? And that's how it got in there. Couldn't tell you. Since everyone seems to be trying to replace D&D, well, you'd have to define everyone there. That's rather broad. What would your ideal replacement? What would be your ideal replacement tabletop game? Would you even push for a role-playing game or some other kind of in-person game? Would it have a setting? Nah. I'm not planning on replacing D&D. I don't think that it will ever die in its entirety. It'll live on in many, many different forms, and Sometime 100 years from now, John Peterson's great-great-grandson will research the schisms in D&D and how it became 7 different games. I don't know. I like board games. You can be loud and talk and joke and laugh and snack and drink and stab your buddy in the back while watching out you're not being stabbed in the back. Or else something you can play with your family, with youngsters. And D20 Delving comes to mind, which is finally going to be released by Customs in, let's see, this comes out on the 7, 10, 9, 10 days. A setting? No, the setting would be a table surrounded by friends and/or family. That would be the setting. I like playing games for fun. I don't have to sit down and play hard strategy games to get my jollies. I like playing fun games. I like having fun. And if you aren't, well, unless you're diagnosable, you ought to be finding something else to do, I guess. Okay, it's nice to see that you are wistful and not jaded over your time at the True TSR. Okay. What you helped create as a legacy I think you're proud of and should be proud of. I know Hasbro, WotC, as they are in control in D&D, are doing many things that many are not happy with. However, what this helps is to create a spark where creators are now thinking beyond the core game and looking into new ways, new rules, enforcing, I think, what will be looked at as a creative renaissance of new ideas. For far too long, for too many creators, I feel just pumped material out that followed a game that at the time... let me back up. For far too long, far too many creators, I feel, just pumped material out that followed a game that at the same time they did not like the creative path, said game owners were going down. Now things might change. We I hope, will look at 2023 as a year gaming shifted finally back into the more gamer-oriented industry. I'd like to think that. We'll see. The only thing that makes that a possibility is the means by which we're communicating right now, or you're viewing and I'm talking, and that's the internet. Within the gaming community, there are enough influencers that if you get a good game, or a game gets good vibes, good results, good reviews, that the internet can spread it virally, in the new sense of the word, virally. And so we have that advantage. If somebody comes up with a rock'em sock'em great new game, everybody will find out and they'll be rewarded and we'll all be playing it. However, it's far more likely that many people will put out smaller games that focus on certain areas that appeal to certain people. And I think, again, with the internet, they have a much, much better chance of marketing, if you will, being seen, and therefore selling games and supporting their hobby of making games. There was a game that I found many years ago, after I'd gone down a rabbit hole about midget wing sprint car racing, that was called Dirt Track Saturday Night. It's a wonderfully simple game, not simplistic, but if you've ever seen a race on dirt, even if it's on TV, you'll get the hang of it. It's not very hard, and the game languished. It was a labor of love type game, and it languished and still does, and I don't even know if the man is still alive. Had he been more eager to share this game with the world, I'm sure the results would have been much different. He had the opportunity and didn't care to any more than beyond what he was doing. And I got to correspond with him a couple of times. He was a neat guy. It was a labor of love because his father was just local Fireball Roberts racing around the part of the country that they lived in. All right, now in response to that last one that I butchered, I think this applies across most entertainment right now. The giant centralized corporate entertainment entities either cannot or will not make anything new for various reasons. And there's a great quote coming up in here. They can only don quality old ideas they purchased like a skin suit and pretend it's something we remember, even though we can clearly see the zipper in the back. Great sentence. Well said. That being said, I believe there is more opportunity right now for small creators with decent new ideas than ever in my lifetime, at least. I'm cautiously optimistic. So am I. When people become disenchanted with a creator, we'll say Wizards or Hasbro or Hasborg, pardon me, and they still want to play, you just don't want to play with them, well, they'll go and look for other good things to play with. And if you're there waiting with a good idea, bingo. Thank you so much for your answer to my last question that made me look at things with fresh eyes. Well, I looked at the person that posted this. I couldn't remember the question that I answered. But hey, that's kind of what I'm here for. That's kind of why people ask, how would I do it? Well, I still have old ideas that are not prevalent right now, but doesn't mean they aren't good ideas. And even if you don't accept an idea that I share, it made you think. It made you think. I'll try to explain this. We used to have a word called ego boo, boosting your ego. My biggest ego boo came not from the idea that my magazine was going out there and exposing the latest new whatever in ads to X number of people or whatever. My thing was like, in my mind, I reached out and I opened up the reader's head and I just poured some ideas in there, closed it back up. I was reaching in and I was massaging all those little brains. And I wasn't trying to make them think one way, because we didn't publish that kind of stuff in Dragon. Not when I was there. All right. Starguard was created pre-74, but the figures were made in 74, I think. You're right. And Starguard is minis. It's minis. It's not a role-playing game. It can be made into one, I know, as can Chainmail or several other rule sets. You can anthropomorphize, is the only word I can think of, yourself into this mini or this mini into you. All right, but Starguard was minis. And it's my recollection from that period in gaming that, number one, minis themselves were a much smaller, much more specialized part of the hobby. They tended to gravitate toward micro tanks, Napoleonic miniatures, not what you see today. And that Starguard just wasn't all that well known, or more people would have been playing it. There would have been demand for more of the figures. Now, the figures were from a company in Salt Lake called McEwan Miniatures. He was a marvelous small-scale sculptor. I loved their stuff. They had monsters before minifig or before Hinchliffe or Heritage or anybody else, McEwan Miniatures had monsters. They had a shambling mound and all were, they just had some great stuff. I can't remember them all right now. When no one else had anything. And what they also had was they had the Acheron Legion, which was a line of skeletal figures, which in the early days of D&D was some hot shit, let me tell you. And nobody had anything like that. And what they had that was absolutely the best thing a miniaturist, and by a miniaturist I don't just mean a player, but also a painter and a converter, could ever want, was they sold individual weapons. Well before Ral Partha started doing this. I had probably it was an embroidery box. It was about this wide and about that tall and about this thick, and it had probably 20, maybe 24 compartments in it, little small compartments, and every one of them I had different kinds of weapons, swords here, axes there, two-handed axe. It was, and for a figure converter, which many of us were back then, to make the same looking guy look different so you could put him in a group or a unit, McEwan Miniatures was the place you went to. How he managed to cast those little bitty swords in lead is their mystery. Best stuff ever at that period of time, particularly. I backed that D&D documentary that you mentioned that Joe Manganiello is handling. I'm amazed that I'm finally may get something from that. That is so late that it was supposed to be delivered in 2015. I know. I know. And some of the interviews are 2 or 3 years older than that. I know that I was in interviews before I got my cancer. So I'm a much larger person. And I look a lot different. They're real old. Hello there. I'm going to be running my first domain management that concentrates on survival from the Great Doom. Haven't decided what that is yet. Well, that's a sticking point. But maybe I can help. Well, domain management isn't my bag. I went and looked up Birthright. And it's a video game. And I'm not particularly into video games. I am into computer games, but not video games. So I can't really give you any useful information except find something else to do. But that's just me. Can you explain the rationale behind the design of the first edition Bard? I have played since 1980, and my son, who is now 37, is playing one for the first time ever in one of my campaigns today. In 44 years of DMing, all my players have avoided it. Well, the Bard was... Well, the Bard was... they've already misused the word I would have gone for. The Bard was supposed to be kind of roguish. There were several movies back then that had comedy. There's a bardic tradition among the Druids that a trained bard could sing a song that would put the camp to sleep. The myths and mythology, okay. But the bard was a combination of that. The bard you just couldn't say, I'm going to be a bard. Yeah, I think you had to be a fighter for a while, and then you had to be a thief for a while. And the rationale of that was because if you're going out on the road and make your living scuffling, you better know how to handle yourself. And then if you're going to go out and try to make a living scuffling, and better than just hand to mouth, you better be nimble, better be quick, better know some tricks. And finally, now you're going to find a nice instrument, take up playing, however able to defend yourself, and nimble with the fingers in providing for your income. Could fight, could finesse, could charm, basically. There's a bardic tradition in the northern European mythologies, anything that was touched on by the Druids, and that's where he came from. It's very challenging to play. Going through those progressions is very challenging to play. And if you do, and you make it to Bard, good for you. Dan the Bard, a commercial lute player, has several CDs of funny role-playing, and a lot of it's D&D specific role-playing music. Has a song called Bard Cap, where the second edition Bard picked on the first edition Bard and got his ass kicked because he didn't remember that they could fight. It's a challenging, very challenging position to play, but if you're, girding up your loins for a long-term campaign, go for it. Go through the progressions, and by the time you become a Bard, you're really kind of badass in lots of different subtle, sometimes unseen ways. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing when we're role-playing? Challenging ourselves? Trying new things? I don't know. I thought we were. Anyway. Let's see. Okay, I'm struggling to find an accessible way to play adventures underwater. The mechanics seem a little dysfunctional. How do you handle underwater play? Well, if I'm writing an adventure where they have to go underwater, I usually cop out, and there's some little whelk shells that if they stick one in a nostril, they can breathe underwater. Magic assistance, or a diving helmet that they can fill with air and go down long enough to suck up the air and hope they get back without it. Or I don't literally dump them in the middle of the ocean. That's no fun for me as a DM and a designer. What is fun for me is watching them how to overcome their buoyancy and things like that with what they have available. The other way you can do is you can do something like at the site where they have to go underwater, you can have some dive suits, like if you watch 20,000, the original 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with Kirk Douglas in it, Nemo's got guys walking across the ocean floor, heavy boots, helmets coming down over the shoulders. I don't recall if there were air tubes or if they had tanks on their back. Sometimes as a DM, you can have a hell of a good time as they try to figure out how to use it. All right. If there's only one whelk shell and they have to put it in one nostril, well, then they got to figure out how to breathe only through one nostril, or else they suck water in every time. Trying to wear the dive helmet without the dive boots. Trying to hold the dive helmet's weight, especially if they're on land and haven't figured out that it weighs a whole lot less on the bottom. There's many ways you can go to it. You can just they can all find a thing they stick in their mouth, and they can swim like fish, and then just have them start swimming into shit and each other. There's no end in different ways you can get them to do it. Now, unless you take into account your hasting or something like that, it's a lot of fun on the bottom of a body of water because everything is slow motion, trying to swing and everything. That's why harpoons and spears underwater are great, because they have less resistance and they're easier to poke. Gee, I wonder if that's why they use spears when they go spear fishing. Less resistance. Let them figure it out. Let them have a bunch of geeky looking tridents and some serviceable super sharp swords. Swords aren't going to do them nearly as much good as the geeky looking tridents will. It's a learning experience. That's all I got. Just to keep the record straight, Metamorphosis Alpha was published in 76 and Traveler in 77. Yes, you're right. And the age-old argument of which was the first sci-fi role-playing game, I leave to the pedantics that want to debate hard sci-fi versus science fantasy or the like. That's true. The dates are correct, yes. And which is what do you call them? Yes. Back then, when products were new and genres were new, as evidenced by 2 new genres here, there was only one, and so they of each, and so they didn't share any kinship. And so, which was what? I don't know. Traveler was hard science fiction, and MA was not. MA was speculative. And it doesn't matter which one came out first. They're both good games in their own way. Though I like MA a whole lot better than I like Traveler. Alright, now I got several comments from the same individual who's showing what ChatGPT, ChatGPT is giving them commands to create a character. It's the funniest shit I've ever seen. It looks to me like a bunch of little schoolboys sat down with a book and made up a list of all the most wonderful things they could possibly get, and got them all, and then started. It's ludicrous. Ludicrous. We don't have anything to worry from ChatGPT. Do I think it will kill creativity in the future? And he even prompted it with a Pegasus Medusa hybrid. Okay. So ChatGPT came up with something. ChatGPT didn't come up with anything brilliant. It was rather pedantic when you read through it. So no, I don't think I'm going to worry about that. And it seems to me that by doing that, again, it's the horrible sin of min-maxing rearing its head. If you're going to play characters like that with and or against each other, you're never going to get anything done trying to remember all the shit you got and the things you can do. Sorry, I don't worry. Now, I got 2 more things to go into this evening. We all know what virtue signaling is. Hey, look what I did, I'm a good guy. And one of the game companies, one of the role-playing game companies, recently put out a t-shirt that I feel certainly on the edge of, if not crossed over into virtue signaling. Now, we would all we being everybody in the industry and almost all the players I know, would like to be more inclusive. Sexually, racially, more inclusive. Gender, I should have said. Gender, racial, more inclusive. I don't put I don't think a picture of Martin Luther King on a gamer's t-shirt is quite the way to go about it. I was kind of, what the? All right, now to some sad news. This past week, we lost one of the brightest stars in the firmament. So bright that upon closer inspection, you might find a little constellation there. And that was an individual whose last name was Ja. I first met Paul when he sent me a picture he sent in some unsolicited art, and I used a piece in a filler. Many years later, he recreated it for me on a Texas Con, NTRPG Con dice bag. It's just a wizard looking at an inscription. He personalized it by putting an illustrated T and an illustrated K in it. We were friends for many years. Did a lot of art. Went our different ways. I was out of gaming for quite some time. And Paul was trans and came out as a female. While I was calling it now, I had heard about it, but again, I was out of the industry for quite some time. And that Paul was the first person I knew that did it and became Janelle. And okay, it was first time I was faced with this incident. And please don't read anything more into the words I'm using. It was the first time I came face to face and with this thing. And wow, okay. And we remain good friends. Janelle worked at Coleco. Janelle worked at TSR. Janelle's artwork was known. Janelle donated the design of the Texas RPG Con, North Texas, every year on their amazing dice bags. Every year doing a new dragon. It was beautiful work. Janelle had a huge influence on the type of video games and computer games when she was at Coleco that mirror what we do around the tabletop. Was a fierce feminist, absolutely as fierce transgender advocate. When the shitstorm with the horrible anti-trans stuff hit in Lake Geneva, she was one of the two that asked, could I address that? And I was glad to, and I did, and kind of beat all over that fire and put it out. Really sorry to see her go. It was, I don't believe, expected to happen quite so fast. We can all speculate on what it might have been, and until there's an official release, it's just a great talent in our industry, a great pioneer in our industry, passed last week. And I'll tell you, it's getting a bummer to see all my friends starting to pass, especially when they're younger than I am. That's all I got. Dodata Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree,
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.